Good afternoon, everyone. I am here with the lovely Helen Hirsh Spence. And after decades of educational leadership, Helen became a solo social entrepreneur in her late 60s. She founded Top 60 Over 60, a niche age diversity. Apologize. Age diversity consultancy after she witnessed firsthand how ageism was impacting her generation and how the upcoming demographic shift would affect North America's social and economical fabric. As a well-respected and sought-after thought leader, Helen has appeared in several major national media outlets, on television, podcasts, and radio. She advocates, writes, and speaks about age diversity in the workforce, intergenerational connection, and how to mitigate the damaging impacts of ageism on individuals, society, and economies. Her mindset is longevity focused. Helen exemplifies someone with a longevity mindset who has declared to reinvent herself later in life. She serves as a role model for both younger and older people who have grown up with a fear of aging because of North America's youth-centric culture. Helen believes that the way forward calls for intergenerational collaboration and wants to see age equity as the norm for future generations. Helen will be asking us, are you longevity minded? So thank you so much for being here, Helen.
Pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. This is a fantastic topic. I know a lot of people will resonate. So you're a leader in education for over 35 years. How and why did you become a social entrepreneur in your late 60s? And before you do, come back live. Thank you.
I don't know what happened. Something keeps automatically switching me off.
Okay, awesome.
Not me. It's not me.
Oh, good.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, I mean, as you mentioned in the intro, one of the reasons why I sought social entrepreneurship was because I was beginning to feel a bit lost, less self-confident. Oh, something's gone on here, and it's not me. Do you know what's going on?
No, I really don't.
Okay, well, I just was cut out altogether, so.
No, there you are.
Okay.
I don't know why it's doing that. Weird.
Don't know why either. Anyway, so I recognized that, you know, something was going on, and I spoke to a lot of friends who were also feeling, mostly women, I might add, also felt like they were losing their sense of purpose. They didn't know which direction to go in. They noticed at parties that they seemed almost invisible, you know, and so they were curious as to what was going on, as was I. So I started doing some research and realized that actually what we were all experiencing was something that's referred to as self-directed or internalized ageism, which is something I knew nothing about. But essentially what it means is that all of those beliefs that we have grown up with in terms of, you know, it's better to be younger than to be older. You know, you can do certain things when you're younger. You can dress a certain way. You can act differently. As you get older, you know, the perception is and has been that you get less active, less interested in life. You know, if you just imagine what that sign is, that triangular yield sign in front of certain places where you have an old man and an old woman crossing the street together with a cane, that more or less symbolizes to me what many people think of as growing older. And so that's not the way it is. And I decided I wanted to do something about it. At the same time, I also met up with a former student who introduced me to the Center for Social Innovation in Toronto, which I knew nothing about, and I was fascinated. So I took some courses on social entrepreneurship, and then I launched Top 60 Over 60 about 6 years ago.
Well, congratulations on that, because you know, you found a niche market that you connect with and you want to help, and you took action to make it happen. So that's fantastic. Thank you. So for the uninitiated,
Mhm.
can you please tell us, and you'll have to tell us what that means too. Can you please tell us what you mean by the term ageism?
Okay, by uninitiated, I just mean people who aren't familiar with the term. And ageism is the belief or prejudice that's based on age, and it manifests itself in, thinking, as I mentioned before, personal thinking. It manifests itself in everyday conversation. It manifests in institutions and policies, retirement, for instance, which is no longer enforceable, but it would have been an example of ageism in organizations that was institutionalized. And so there's evidence of that everywhere. And unfortunately, ageism is the only bias or discriminatory practice that continues to be socially acceptable because most people don't recognize what it is. And I can give you a whole bunch of examples. For instance, there's something called elder speak, which would be, somebody who's perhaps in a institutional setting and being cared for by somebody, but the person talks to them as if they're a child. In other words, saying, is your tummy talking to you yet? Do you need to? That's all evidence of ageism. Another example would be, when you get to the counter at the checkout in the grocery store, and the gentleman behind the cash says, so dear, or honey, some cute kind of reference. And that doesn't usually happen to men, but it often happens to women. I'm not your dear, and I'm not your honey. So please don't refer to me as such. So those are examples. But then you have very much more subtle things in workplaces, such as the individual who approaches me and because I'm in a certain place, there's something really wrong here because I keep getting knocked out. So I lose track of what I'm trying to say every time. Anyway, so I think was I talking about the healthcare situation where a doctor, for instance, will speak to whoever my advocate is, like my daughter or son or whoever accompanies me, as opposed to me.
You.
I'm perfect. I'm perfectly capable of answering. Oh, I know. I was talking about the working space. In the working place, somebody might come up to me and say, so when are you retiring, Helen? I had no intention to retire, and yet the perception is because maybe I have gray hair or I've been around for a while that I'm going to retire. All of those comments influence the way in which we feel about ourselves, and they have a sticking power that you don't recognize very often, but has a huge impact on confidence, on a feeling of isolation, loneliness, and such. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah. And I know exactly what you're talking about, being with my grandparents, being with my mom, or, taking them to appointments and whatnot. I know exactly what you're talking about. But there are some that are very respectful and very conscious and won't do that, right?
Well, there are, sure, but I think most people don't recognize that they mean well very often when they call you dear or whatever, but it's not respectful. I mean, I appreciate if somebody wants to get up from a seat in the bus for me. That's what my mother taught me to do for older people. And I can say, thanks, I'm fine on my feet. I don't see that as being ageist. I see that as being respectful. But when you start diminishing who I am because I'm older, then it becomes ageist. And there's so many other examples of it, in policies and, trying to get insurance as a solo older entrepreneur isn't easy. There are, loans, try to get loans. There's a whole bunch of areas in which we have not really taken a close look to see how it affects the individual who is, uh, the biases being perpetrated against. So,
Mhm. So why is it important to understand the implications of ageism?
There are a number of reasons, frankly. I think one of the biggest reasons that people don't fully grasp is the fact that we have an aging population. We have more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 14 in Canada. It's the fastest growing segment globally, those people who are age 65 and older. In the United States, I think it's there are 10 people who turn 65, sorry. It's becoming like a fifth of the population in the next decade are going to be 65 and older. And so it's a bit like climate change. We've known this for a really long time. This demographic shift has a huge impact on the way in which we will be able to conduct our lives, our economies, social structures, because the fertility rate has gone down and continues to go down, and there's no expectation that it's going to increase in this particular century, in the 21st century. Therefore, we're going to have an older and older population. So what are we doing about that? Politicians are aware of it. City councils are aware of it, but are we building cities to accommodate everybody as they age? I don't think so, not yet. And it's not just cities, it's all sorts of new technology. For instance, whether it's a phone or whether it's a screen, as you get older, there are certain things that shift. And one of them is eyesight and the other is hearing. So, there are a number of ways in which we need to think about aging. And yet ageism, which is this negative belief about aging, gets in the way. So a lot of people are unable to really fulfill their potential.
I hear you. Okay, thank you for that. So what kinds of ageism do older people confront daily, but probably don't recognize it because it doesn't do them harm?
Well, I think I mentioned a number of them, just those kinds of comments that you get at the grocery store and the way in which people conduct themselves with you are pretty good examples of what kind of ageism everybody encounters. There's also, as I said, I think the most important kind that we don't recognize is what we think ourselves. Do you ever think that you're too old to do something now?
No.
No. Well, you're among a few people who don't, but you're not that old. You're not as old yet as you eventually will be. It's interesting. Ageism is really a prejudice against our future selves, because everybody, if they're lucky, is going to age. So we need to be sure that we want to treat our older adults who are in our midst well, because that's the way we want to be treated when the time comes. And that means with dignity, with respect, and also giving people a chance to do what they still want to do, which is lead a purposeful life. And that could be finding work if they need it, because more and more people, as they live longer, will need more money because they didn't anticipate living as long as they will. And then beyond. Is there anything you can do on your end, Randy? I get cut out.
No, it's not on my end. It's on your end for some reason. Just ignore it. Just flip it back, but ignore it. Don't let it get in your way. So you say that age is different in the 21st century. Tell us about that.
Well, in the 21st century, our lifespans have been extended some 30 or so years. Wow. And compared to what it was at the beginning of the 20th century. So our average lifespan at the beginning of the 20th century was 47. Today, our average lifespan in Canada anyway is about 82. And my grandchildren will have an average lifespan of 100. So when we think of getting older, we often use a 20th century paradigm. We think in terms of the 20th century when older people didn't live as long. And so, if your grandmother was 75 when she passed away, you would associate that age with being old or older. But today, we continue to think about age in the same way as we did before, although our lifespans and our health spans have been extended dramatically. So
Mhm.
it's really important to understand that all of the judgments, practices, policies that were put in place last century that still exist are really outdated. So retirement's a great example. People don't like to hear about it, but the truth of the matter is that, it was established in the 1930s when 62 is the average length of life, and living to 65 was really a reward for living that long. Now we're almost 100 years afterwards. We have extended lifespans, but we haven't changed the date of retirement. And the reality is that if we don't do something about that and extend it, one, there are going to be even more difficulties with pensions and so on. But the truth of the matter is we'll have nobody working, and that means the economy will buckle and it'll have huge societal implications. We need older people in the workforce today, doing a variety of different things, not necessarily exactly the same. And it doesn't have to be always for money. It could be voluntarily that they're in the workforce, but they need to be purposefully engaged in order to stay healthy. So staying in the work environment is conducive to lengthening your life because you have those social connections. But as I say, the work doesn't have to be just remunerative. It doesn't have to be financially compensated. It can be something that you enjoy doing in the community. But we need people to stay in those jobs.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we're in serious trouble moving forward.
Yeah, I agree, but it also tends to, you know, a lot of people, I find that when they're getting older and they stop working or they retire, and maybe they don't really have a plan, like a hobby or a function that they're doing, they either tend to get sick quicker, pass
Right.
away faster, kind of feel they don't really have a purpose, and the whole body starts to shut down. And I think it's really important to keep your brain going so you avoid dementia and other diseases that could, start to come into play with your mind. And then, of course, the physical part as well. So I think it's really important to be able to stay engaged in your older years, whatever it is you choose to do.
No, you're accurate. I mean, that's so true, and you're right. I mean, I know so many colleagues who stopped working without a plan, and they just fell off and died with a stroke or heart attack or something. Remarkably, especially men in particular, because they don't have quite as many social connections as women tend to, and they're not as emotional, generally speaking. I know all of these are gross generalizations, but the reality is that women are living longer. And part of the reason they suspect that they live longer is because they are more socially interactive, and they stay that way later in life as well. So working or continuing to stay engaged, physical exercise, eating well, sleeping well, keep continuing to learn, social engagement, those will all propel you much better into the future of your later years than any little pill that you can take.
Yeah, for sure. So this topic right here really answers the question that I was going to ask you about what do you mean by longevity minded and why is this mindset important? Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, having a longevity mindset is really sort of new language for having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. So growth means all the things I just referred to, that you continue learning, you continue to contribute to society, you stay active and so on. And you welcome feedback, and you want to learn from the mistakes that you make. Longevity mindset really means that you accept the fact that your life will be longer, and you believe that that's going to be normal. It's not an exception anymore. It's the way it is. And how are you going to change with the times so that you can accommodate your longer lifespan and your longer health span? And that's what we mean. And I think that, businesses are going to have to consider longevity strategies in their business, and they're going to have to think differently. So a lot of people today are being they're walking out the door at 65. And a lot of these organizations are losing all their intellectual know-how and, resources by allowing that to happen. There has to be a number of shifts and changes where you retain some of that corporate knowledge and transfer it to other generations. And that's what I mean about having a multi-generational workforce. I mean, when I grew up, you had at most 2 to 3 generations alive. Today, you have 6 generations alive very often. You have great-great-grandmothers. And so in the workforce, it's not unusual to find 4 or 5 generations working together. And that will be the norm moving forward. So what we have to overcome are all those prejudices, all those ageist biases as older people towards younger people, and younger people towards older people. And that can be easily overcome as soon as you connect people with one another, or you establish work groups where people get a chance to share information, because our values seem to be pretty much the same. And the one thing that is a constant is that older and younger people would like to have more flexibility in their lives. That's probably the number one thing that they all have in common. So that's what I mean by a longevity mindset, and making the plan. So in the work that I do, I've offered purpose courses, transition courses. It's absolutely critical to recognize that there isn't an expiry date on your life. You are productive as long as you want to be productive, and that's what a lot of people don't get. And as a result of it, they diminish their own self-worth, and their potential is underutilized. And we as a society are doing that to ourselves and to one another. And that's where the danger is.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you provide some statistics about aging today in Canada, US, or globally?
Yeah, I started to mention that today we have 82 as our average length of life in Canada. In the United States, about 78, 79. It's gone down in the last couple of years. And there's COVID, of course, but basically our lifespans have been expanded. In the United States, there are 10,000 people who turn 65 every day. And globally, there's a person who turns 65 every second. So we're going to double the older population. And the fastest segment of the population that's growing today are those who are 85 and older. So, we have more centenarians than we've ever had before. And as I said earlier, about a fifth of our population, about a quarter of our population by the end of the decade or into the next decade. And for the Americans, it'll be about a fifth of the population. So it's expanding really fast, and there's nobody coming up to replace us. So we got to start thinking differently, especially if we're going to be living into our 80s, 90s, and 100s, right?
Okay. Where does the notion of retirement come into play in this new paradigm?
Well, I think I answered that question. It doesn't, in that it can, but I think we have to think in terms of unretirement. Retirement implies that you withdraw from life or from your job, and you may do that, but you need to find something else to do. Otherwise, you're not going to be very successful moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So I understand that you're a thought leader in the longevity or age space and frequently invited to give keynote addresses, podcasts, radio interviews, and webinars. What are some of the most important messages that you want your audience to understand or experience?
One, I want them to understand what ageism is, because it's very important for everybody as an individual. Thinking negatively about your age can shorten your life. They know that optimism and positivity about living longer will help you heal faster, age more slowly. Cognitive decline is pushed further back. There are a lot of reasons why it's valuable to believe that getting older is significant. The other thing is that life gets better as you get older. And there have been numerous studies that have been done that have proven that the most difficult time in life is, between 30 and 50, when you're raising a family and when you have a mortgage, when you're looking at career. But all sorts of studies show that the beginning of life and towards the end of life tend to be the happiest time. And then I think I'd also say, you need to start thinking, be longevity minded. I think it's critical that you think beyond the immediate, and that you really plan well. Everybody talks about financial planning when they retire. They don't talk about anything other than that, or typically they haven't. I remember when I was approaching the time of my potential retirement, my board was giving, because I was working in a school board as a secondary principal at the time, they were giving financial planning webinars for people who were going to leave. Well, that's great, and it's very necessary, and it certainly has shifted, but there's a lot more that has to shift in understanding. And one of them is that the women are going to out survive the men. And so financial planners better make a better connection with a lot of the wives rather than just with the men with whom they work. So, I think those are among the key messages, ageism, longevity, and really thinking positively about the future. And I think, if we're going to succeed at obliterating ageism, we need to have more intergenerational connections. The World Health Organization put out a report on global ageism. No, it was a global report on ageism, in which it said 1 out of 2 people are ageist against older people. And the best way in which they suggested overcoming this was through connections with young people. And younger people being connected to older people. Not everybody is fortunate to have a grandparent around, but there are plenty of other older adults in the midst that you could interact with. And coming up with creative ways of making that happen is significant as well. So, so that's one way. The other way is education. We have to do a lot more educating about ageism. And we haven't done that very well. Think about all the fairy tales for little children. Who's the witch? It's the woman with the gray hair who's older, right? So, little kids as young as 3 already are ageist towards growing old.
Yeah, and that's remarkable, like to have 1 out of 2 people who are, have some sort of issue towards people that are older, where, I can see it. They get dismissed. They're not important. Or you can take the flip side, like I recorded, and this is like more than 30 years ago. My grandfather was home ill for 8 years before he passed away. And I was in my young 20s. And I'm thinking, when he goes, all his stories go with him, and I recorded him. So anytime that he felt good enough to speak, I recorded him on video telling me his story, because I said, and at the time I had no clue. I was a math and science student. I had no clue I was ever going to write anything, right?
Yeah.
And I told him I was going to write a book. I don't know where it came from, but I told him I was going to write a book one day. And it's amazing, because these, the older generation has all the experience and all the knowledge, and I agree with you, it doesn't necessarily get valued the same way. They just look at you as you're an old, decrepit old person, like you're not useful anymore, where they're totally forgetting your body might not be keeping up with your mind, right? And sometimes the mind isn't either, but if you're all there, sometimes your body might not be on the same page, but your brain is, and all that knowledge and experience you've had in your lifetime is so valuable. Like when that person goes, all that knowledge and experience goes with them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I have to mention, though, that that's really true in North American culture. It's not at all true in a lot of Asian cultures and other indigenous cultures. Even here in Canada, we know that the elders in indigenous cultures are well respected and valued. And I mean, it makes sense. They're the ones who pass down the history, right? That's the way it's been for millennia, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
mhm.
Absolutely. Okay, so tell us a bit more about your business, Top 60 Over 60, and how can folks here get in touch with you, and what services do you provide?
So it's a niche consultancy where I work with businesses and individuals to help them understand, the value of older adults. So with businesses, I may look at training sessions and programs for employees to consider, ways in which they can retain some of the staff that they want, or rehire, or bring in older adults. When I mentioned before, we have courses on purpose and transition. That's really mostly for people who individually want some coaching or help, and I put together courses as well on that. But I should mention the reason I started this originally and why I named it Top 60 Over 60 is because I really had intended to host a summit or an event in which there would be 60 people over the age of 60 who were extraordinary, ordinary individuals who could serve as role models for future generations and also for my own generation, so that people get inspired to look forward to growing older, as opposed to, fearing it, because you're lucky if you get to a ripe old age. It's not a given, so so that's what I intended to do. I'm still looking for a sponsor, but I got sidelined and got involved in working with businesses and other people and other organizations, and I provide resources. I do a lot of writing and speaking, and I can be contacted easily through my email. And I think I gave you all the links. Helen at top60over60.com, which I know you'll put in the notes probably below, but my website is top60over60, all spelled out.com. And I have lots of resources there as well, and other newsletters that people can get in touch with me and also get a newsletter. So.
Perfect. Okay. And what is your greatest challenge working in this area, and how can our viewers or listeners help?
The greatest challenge is reaching people and getting them to understand. So what I would ask of the audience is that they call out ageism whenever they see it, and that they start to recognize what it looks like. Don't tell me that, if I put pink or blue in my hair, that it's not age appropriate. That's ageist, and so start thinking about what it means to be older, and consider educating yourself and others, but significantly, just, call it out. You don't have to be mean or rude, just say, a common expression is, and older people are guilty more than anybody else. I'm having a seniors moment.
Mm.
Well, all that does is reinforce the fact that, you sometimes people as they get older experience cognitive decline. The reality, however, is that, you will use your keys as much as I will in your 30s, or misplace them. So, we have, our brain is plastic. We continue to learn and there's no expiry date, as I said.
Right. Okay, and it's so true what you said. If you had only one message that you would like to leave with the audience, what would it be?
Start thinking about your future as you age. Move forward. Get rid of all that youth-centric thinking, where would the beauty industry be with, they've done a great job at making us feel insecure about growing older.
Mm.
It's over a $60 billion industry and it's going to double by the end of the decade. And that's only because they've been successful at making us believe that as we get older, we need to get rid of all these marks and wrinkles and gray hair. Without them being successful, their business wouldn't be as good. I'm not trying to be anti-capitalist, but we've been sold a really negative message, which needs to be countered.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we need people like you out there who are going to help show the way.
Well, they can see me. Look at how it goes in and out. I've never had that experience before. The
Yeah.
image, and I was just on another program, didn't have a problem with it. So
Mm.
I don't know what's happening.
Maybe weird. Maybe it's a connection to YouTube. I'm not sure.
I
No
have
idea, but it's not doing it to mine. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, my dear. But that was wonderful of you to share all this great information with us. It's definitely a topic that we need to be more aware of. And it's great to have people like you who are out there to help us get more aware about it. So thank you for that. Thank you for a great presentation. And we look forward to